and welcome. Welcome to Camp Webinar, California Master Beekeeper webinar, yet again in the series. We're pretty good at this. We've done quite a few of them so far. I think this is up to number 10. And we have Leah Taylor, SRA from UCCE in San Diego. And Leah is also our program manager, our camp program manager for, the Southern California area, really. And Leah, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started, and I'll turn it all over to you. You can take us away and help us gain a deeper understanding on rules and regs, beekeeping, and bees in California.
Wendy, thanks for the intro. So I am a...
And I want to thank everybody in advance for muting. So I'm muting everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. So a little tiny smidgen about me is I got started in my beekeeping regulation journey about 10 years ago when I started working for the County Department of Agriculture in San Diego. I worked in the entomology lab, and through that lab, the process of changing the local beekeeping ordinance in San Diego got started. We were talking about it one day, and boom, everyone got really interested, and henceforth my journey deep down into all of California regulations. And that led me to a statewide research investigation into how other states were doing their regulations, and then ultimately coming up with a new plan for San Diego. So I've expanded that to cover a lot of California, and I've learned a lot of interesting things throughout my research journey into how to find laws and regs and code and how to read it. And I've learned it's really complicated. So I'm happy to share a little bit of that knowledge with you all tonight.
Yeah, we're pretty happy that you're here to help us understand it and help us understand where to find it, right? That's usually a barrier. Yeah, so take it away. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Awesome. Bear with my technical difficulties, everyone. I'm trying hard, so I'm gonna share that screen, but I'll also start my PowerPoint. Can you see my PowerPoint, or do you still see it?
Yeah, it's great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So I thought we'd start with a little intro into the El Nino Bee Lab. It's a big portion of our camp journey, and their goal is to characterize biotic and abiotic stressors affecting colony health in order to inform development of immediate and long-term solutions for bees and beekeepers. My reason for pointing this out is this sentence really encompasses what regulation is looking for, right? They turn to research, labs, university information, and just local beekeepers, us, to determine and make changes to what the regulation is showing. So we'll get started. That's me. And here we are. So why regulation? Oh goodness, I could go on and on and on, but following the laws and regs is necessary for public safety. That is what the all government agencies are trying to accomplish when they're writing regulations for others to follow. And they're constantly changing, right, due to environmental impact, and us as stakeholders, we have the ability to voice our concerns about the regulations that are currently in place and make changes. There's lots of reasons why, right? Why apiary regulations? We protect the economic contributions of honeybees and beekeepers. The regulations really split those that produce honey separate from those who have bees for pollination services. So this is catered a lot towards that public industry, right? They've got all the money, and sometimes the money means more power. But all apiary regulations fall on anyone who is keeping bees. So whether you have 4,000 hives or 4 hives, you're still subject to the same type of laws and regs. We like to prevent spread of contagion, and that word contagion comes up a lot also in regulation, and it means a whole bunch of different things. Pests, pathogens, parasites, any issue that would negatively impact or present risk to the industry of apiculture. We use regulation to notify beekeepers of pesticide applications. I'll go a little bit more into the Beware program and what you get out of apiary registration, but pesticide notification is the #1 reason from regulators. Public safety, right? If that's always a huge factor. I use that term a lot when I keep bees and think about being a good neighbor. It's really about public safety. And providing food safety and origin authenticity of honey. That is also a big factor in regulation, and also one reason why they split in the codes, beekeeping from honey producing. And I'll show you online what that looks like. So that's the not fun stuff. The more fun stuff is where to start. I'm a beekeeper. I want to keep bees. I want to know if it's legal where I'm at. What the heck do I do now? And it's not so cut and dry, white and black as you would like it to be. The first thing you need to know is, where are you? And I assume most of us are in California that are on this call, but for those of you who are not, let's start big. You are in the United States, at least, I hope. And from there, the United States has its own group of laws. And within that, you're in a state, California, and it has its own group of laws. And then you shrink down a little more, you're in a county somewhere. I'm in San Diego County. It has its own set of laws. And then within counties, there's 18, for example, 18 separate cities in just San Diego County. And they all have their own sets of laws. So it can get really confusing really quickly where you're at and where your bees are, if it's legal or not legal to keep bees there. Excuse me, to keep bees there. And how do you know where you're at? Am I in under city jurisdiction or county jurisdiction? It's not always so easy to tell. So I'm gonna pop online and show you a good place to start when you're looking for regulations. Let me see if I can just, oh, that's the next slide. Let's see if I can end this. There we go. Hopefully you can still see my internet screen. So this is a tab for counties.org, the California State Association of Counties. This is your go-to. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know how to find me. A great place to start when you're looking for regulations. This site has every county and every city within that county. For example, let's see, Los Angeles, frickin' a million different cities. So you as a beekeeper could live in, say, Glendale, but you keep your bees in Downey, and you need to know the differences between those two places. Also, when you are looking for beekeeping regulation, say I know that Wendy lives, let's start over. Wendy lives in El Dorado Hills. So if I am Wendy and I have no idea if it's legal to keep bees in my city or county, I would go to Google. I promise you this is the best place to start. El Dorado Hills. You could search for ordinance or municipal code. These are generally interchangeable. when you're doing a Google search, right? Ordinance or municipal code will get you where you're going. And every city has a code, I promise. But the problem is none of them are housed in any government website. They're all in these weirdo websites like American Legal Publishing Corporation or codepublishing.com or municode.com or qcode.com, right? So it takes a minute to find where you're looking for, but there's 4 big main ones that you can trust. So if I were Wendy and I found El Dorado County, California, and I want to know if it's legal to keep bees in my county, what would you search for? Let's try bees. And thankfully, something comes up. So we can go here, click on definitions, and this will highlight my search term. They all do this. All of the county codes, no matter which website you're on, will do this highlighting, depending on the key term that you're looking for. But let's say, for example, nothing came up. You might want to try apiary and hope something comes up. In this case, it does, but not in all cases. So I'm going to go back. I'm just going to flip back and forth to a whole bunch of different things. I'll go back to my PowerPoint. Let's see, hope you all can see that. And give you this fun list of what to search for. So I want to point out this list because I have been on every city's municipal code in California, and I have looked for a bunch of different key terms. Some of them come up with absolutely nothing but one of this list of terms. So if I type in bees, it's blank. If I type in beehive, it's blank. Beekeeping, nothing. Beekeeper, nothing. So you'd think, oh, well, there's maybe no regulations on beekeeping in my county. But that's not always the case. So this is, I search all 8 or 9 of these key terms every time I'm looking for what I'm looking for in that, on one of those websites, which are listed here: American Legal Publishing, Code Publishing, Municode, or QCode. I know that's boring, but it is, it's the easiest place you can start when you're looking for a specific regulation. For us, right, we're talking about beekeeping. And I'll go into that just a little while down the road. So to figure out what you need to do, where to start, once you've got your jurisdiction, so you know where you live, we look at federal law. That's the biggest umbrella, and you need to follow all the umbrellas all the way up. So you want to make sure you're following this federal jurisdiction, which outlines general provisions are your definitions, and then it also goes through importation of adult honeybees, restricted organisms, transportation, importation, etc. So if you're new to beekeeping, you would want to go here and make sure that you are reading and understanding what the federal laws are. And then it gets a little more personal when we look at California laws. So no matter what city you're in or county you're in, you still must follow all the California regulations. And those are through the California Department of Food and Agriculture. And I'm going to take you to their website because it's difficult to navigate. So we can go through it. We can go through it together. Sure I am. There we go. So this is the, let's see, I hope you can see that. This is the federal regulations and what it looks like. I hope you all know, if not, write this down. We are governed by the USDA federally. That's the United States Department of Agriculture. Then one step down from that is the California Department of Agriculture. So this is what the Food and Ag Code as pertaining to honeybees looks like. You can reach this from their website. You can reach this through Google. You can reach this a lot of different ways. You can reach it through asking me for it. I'm happy to send it out. The top things, I'm not going to go through all of these for you, but when you are first starting out in beekeeping and you want to know if it's legal to keep bees, this is Article 1, General Provisions. This really gives you an overview of these definitions and what it means, what beekeeping means to this group of government entities. You'll want to glance at this use of pesticides. That's a important portion of laws, regs, and also deciding where to put your bees. You want to make sure that you may not be in violation of any pesticide regulations. And I also wanted to point out, there's a million pages in this thing, so I'm not going to read it all for you. But they separate these beekeeping, management, and honey production into two, right? Chapter 1 for bees and Chapter 2 for honey, because honey is consumable and it creates a whole different layer of standards and government departments that are required to regulate this. So labeling of honey, I get a lot of questions about labeling of honey. Most counties have their own regulations through the health department, but the state does too. So we want to make sure that we are following that state umbrella. If nothing else, if you don't have any beekeeping regulations in your specific city or county, you still always default to the state regulations. Okay, let's go back to PowerPoint. Okay, I think that's working. So this is a screenshot of the California Department of Food and Ag homepage. They have a whole bunch of info about pollinator protection, apiary branding, which used to give you a 4-digit code to stamp on the side of your boxes. And the takeaway from us is to at least know where to locate this. So if you need to pull it up, be proficient or download this somewhere, and we expect you to be able to locate your laws for your area.
Leah, you want to swap displays again, please?
Oh, yeah.
No, thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Better?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Somehow I got backwards. It's okay. I'm going to turn it back off in a second. So I really wanted to point out that there have been some recent changes to the legislation about Africanized bees. So let's see, bear with me again, and I'll pop back to the internet. I hope this is all working okay. And find, whoops, back one more. This section, 9320, about Africanized bees. And I wanted to read this to you for a couple of reasons. You should all know this and really study this, but also I think it's a confusing written law. So when you read it a couple times, it takes some deciphering, and I think it's important to realize that I'm not a lawyer, and most of us are not also lawyers. So to be the most correct, when you read this, you can always double check with your local code enforcement agency or city planner, right, to make sure that you're reading it right too. Anyway, so Africanized honeybees, this was amended, as I stated recently, as of January 1st, 2018, which for this is pretty good. The last time it was amended, right, in like 1994. So Africanized bees are a hot topic for us. The California Department of Food and Ag says the secretary, that means the State Department, in cooperation with the regents of the University of California, may approve programs statewide to train on a voluntary basis beekeepers in the maintenance of colonies free of Africanized honeybees. So that explicitly states that you cannot train using Africanized honeybees. It also states any hive or comparable apparatus that is not occupied by a live bee colony and that is accessible to bees is a public nuisance. So that's boxes in your yard that Africanized bees could move into for any reason. The hive or apparatus shall be subject to abatement in the manner provided in Article 14. That's stating that the county has an ability to immediately abate any Africanized bees in boxes or any other container or apparatus. The third is a governing board of a city and county may by ordinance establish procedures for the abatement of a hive or comparable apparatus where Africanized or overly defensive honeybees are present. So we, as California Master Beekeepers, I'll switch back to my PowerPoint. We encourage you to be educated about locally defensive or Africanized bees and understand the legality of keeping them as a hobby. Please don't. That's all I'll say. So this is what I just read to you. And I wanted to let this sink in. I'd say 2 years ago, giving this presentation, this figure was at about, let's say, a third mid up the county lines, right? Like no more north than San Bernardino. And now we find Africanized bees as high north. I think that's Napa and Sac over here. So it's slowly changing the way we're keeping bees, definitely in Southern California, and the regulations are really reflecting that need and evolution as we gain more Africanized bees just naturally. The regulations are changing with it. Also scary, right? We're moving Africanized bees north, and we want to slow that process as much as we can. And one way is to not manage them as beekeepers, which then lets more in the environment, et cetera, and keeps those generations going. Okay, so next, let's talk about county laws and regs. This is an example of San Diego County regulations. And I'd like to point out that there are lots of sections, and every section includes a whole new group of language that you have to decipher, go through, understand. And this is just one of like 3 pages of the county laws. And then within that, for example, San Diego County, there's 18 other cities involved. So for our counties, for California, there are 58 individual counties. So you should learn and figure out which county you were in. And within those counties, there's 482 individual cities. And that first website that I showed you, counties.org, through the California State Association of Counties, maintains all of those records and updates as frequently as they can. Who's under what and who's doing what with who, et cetera, et cetera. And here's a list of all of our counties. I added this component of general law counties versus charter counties, there seems to me to be a natural division. Charter counties are counties that kind of make their own rules, and general law counties follow mostly the state regulations. And I seem to feel that there's a trend with that also with beekeeping. Charter counties seem to have a more regulations, more what's the word I'm looking for? Like all encompassing, more thought out, more gosh darn, I can't find the word I'm thinking of. They have more inclusive. There's a lot more regulation in those counties that they've thought about who's in their counties, who's beekeeping, who's not, that kind of thing. And most of the general law counties seem to follow or default to what the state regulations are. That's what I wanted to point out. So next you go from your inner city or your inner county to your city ordinances. And I went through it pretty quickly how to find what you're looking for in your city. So Google is a great place to start, but once you know, say you're in Davis Municipal Code, you want to look up the beekeeping regulations within that code by searching some of those key terms: hives, bees, beekeeping, beekeepers. That'll get you pretty close. As well as, here is a form I've made for beekeeping regulations in incorporated cities within the county of San Diego. And I wanted to point out just how different all of these are. And since this has been made, there are constant changes, like every few months in general, right, when courts are meeting and things are kind of on a normal pace. They're changing all the time through stakeholders and constituents and people going in front of their county board of supervisors or their city planning group and asking for the distances from a building to be reduced, or the distance from a property line, for example. I lost my train of thought. That's what happened. So let's go to register your hives through your county agricultural commissioner's office. There's some big changes happening through the State Department of Agriculture, that's the CDFA. They've created this Beware. It's a new program that gives agricultural commissioners the authority to seek administrative penalties when a beekeeper does not register. You as a beekeeper register directly through Beware. You can go to bewarecalifornia.com to do that. And if you register with your local county ag commissioner's office, they then take your information and register that into the Beware database on their end. So your information is still going to the state, no matter who you provide, either straight to them or through the county ag commissioner's office. So they're really cracking down on registration through the state level and also at the county level. And a reason for that is pesticide regulation. So a big portion of your registration includes contact information. So local counties can contact you if there's going to be a pesticide application near the registered site of your bees, that they'll be able to notify you at least 24 hours ahead of time. So you can either close your hive or move your bees if possible. So that's their big push, reason why that they would prefer you to register. But it also allows you to have a really good rapport and kind of connection with the local apiary inspector in your county. When you register, your ag commissioner's office has a beekeeping apiary inspector who is in charge of making sure that the beekeeping regulations are followed in your county. Almost every county has one. I want to say it's, Alina just told me the number. It was 41 or 51. So there's a whole bunch that that do more than that don't. And this registration is their first look at you, that you're doing what you should be doing, and that also includes you know, all the other regulations from your city or county level. The University of California, specifically Dr. Nino, created a beekeeping best management practices for urban beekeepers. We talk a lot about industry and commercial beekeepers, and that can be who regulation caters to. But we want to be able to protect also backyard beekeepers and say confidently that we know that they're following all the best management practices to honor public safety and be proactive in their management. The main purpose for this best management practices for urban beekeeping document is to provide a standard criteria based on beekeeping best management practices for assessing whether a beekeeper has created a nuisance, and if so, providing guidance for making recommendations about how to mitigate the nuisance. This is a living document allowing for adjustments. This is created from feedback from urban beekeepers, backyard beekeepers, sideliners, anyone who would be able to contribute their experience to this document. This helps beekeepers from having regulators misunderstand what they're doing, right? So we want to be able to determine if a beekeeper has created a nuisance through, let's say, mismanagement versus lack of knowledge, and then be able to step in and provide some knowledge. And us as California Master Beekeepers are a great connection and first line to provide, say, a new person who might fall under this, have this problem through lack of knowledge, they're mismanaging their bees and creating a nuisance. We're able through our outreach efforts to be able to provide some training to them and to be an interface between them and, say, an apiary inspector or a regulator who's enforcing the law. So registering your hives, their hives, and being connected with an apiary inspector really makes that sense of community and will help others rather than, let's say, have the proverbial book thrown at them, right? So we'll circle back around to what do you do if Google fails? It's really frustrating, let me tell you, and it will fail sometimes. If you have no idea what jurisdiction you're in, you have no idea where to start or where to go, write your local regulatory agency. That can be your local ag commissioner's office, code enforcement agency, city planner. Wendy and I had this problem just a couple days ago. She said, what about this? I forget what city it was. And I couldn't find anything online. I looked it up. I went through the municipal code. None of my key terms worked. And at the bottom of the code, there is an email. And I wrote, city planner at modestocounty.com or whatever it was. And I said, I want to keep bees in this city. Send me the code, or is it legal? Where can you point me in the right direction? And within, I'd say 10 minutes, I had a reply that was concise. It had a link. They knew where to look. And it was under a really weird term that I didn't think to search for. It was like urban farming or something. And that included bees. So, you just never know if you don't know where to start, and your search just come up with no one, go straight to the source. They're there for you, and they're really helpful. Also, I wanted to remind you, if you live in an area that doesn't define beekeeping, there's two things. You default to the state regulations no matter what. You should be following what's in the Food and Ag Code, registering your hive, putting your contact information, all those things, not keeping Africanized bees, no matter what. But if you live in a city that there is not a code defined, you want to make sure you follow that state code. You want to make sure you follow up with your regulatory body. And often I've found after following up with a city planner that they requested that if I were to keep bees in that city, to have some sort of permit. And they don't normally do it, and they would write it on the fly, but it was nice to double check with those agencies before I put bees anywhere. If you can't find anything in any code online, if it's right or wrong, double check with all your local agencies. And I invite you to double check with me too. I have a spreadsheet of 482 tabs that have every city and county labeled, and I've looked up all the regulations all over the place, and I'd be happy to compare notes with you. So, as a brief reminder, a beekeeper should comply with the state, county, and city regulations. These articles I've highlighted are the most important, and often what regulation we deal with the most. We as backyard beekeepers, you often don't deal with a lot of these other entities, but they they should be on your list. You should breeze through these and make sure that where your bees are, you are complying with the state, you're complying with your county or your city, and knowing if you're in a county or a city. And I have one more thing to show you. Let me go back to Google Chrome. There's this great tool called a jurisdiction finder. This is on the UCCE San Diego website, but you can find this parcel lookup for your city or county. And I'm going to put in, so if I didn't know what county in San Diego, or sorry, excuse me, what city, I'll show you San Diego just because that's where I'm at. If I didn't know what city of the 18 cities in San Diego that I was at, I could put my address. I will use my office address. There I am. And it shows me I am in, if you can see that green overlay, here's my key down here, I'm in San Diego. If I was in, say, a different city, or if I was in an unincorporated part of the city, this is my home address, it shows me nowhere. I hope that's making sense to everybody. So because I am outside, outside city property, it shows me blank. So if I lived, say, in San Miguel Ranch Road, I would be in Chula Vista jurisdiction. So that's one way. That's a one tool that we have available. You can type in your address, and these are through the county ag commissioner's office. So you can find your county's ag commissioner's office and look up their jurisdiction map, just in case you have no idea where to start. So with that blabbering on, I will go back to my PowerPoint one time just to say thank you. Oh, and my screens are backwards. See, I can't get it together. Thank you for letting me babble to you about laws and regs. And I'm hoping you guys have a bajillion questions, and Wendy and I would love to sit and chat. So I will end my screen share.
Thank you, Leah. That was very informative. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and it's about the Olympic size Excel sheet that you have there. I'm telling you, that took some perseverance. We do have some great questions. Bob asked, how is the Africanized honeybee range determined, right? So,
That's a great question.
yeah.
There's a group of researchers that has done studies on it, including I think Alina's been involved
Mm-hmm.
lately
Yep.
with that group too. So as far as I know, they've only collected data once every 2 years. So the map that I have is from 2018. And Wendy, do you know anything?
No,
Yeah,
I don't.
I don't know when a new map is going to be published, but that group has their own sets of bees that they collect from to determine Africanization, and they get them genetically tested. So I don't know if there's a way to contribute to that group, to their bees, but whatever county you are in, especially if you're in a county maybe that doesn't have Africanized bees yet, or that you know of, if you were to find or come across any hives, your own hives or otherwise, that have that behavior, display any overly defensive or Africanized bee characteristics, your local ag commissioner would be really interested in that. I'm very, very sure. So they're considered an invasive species, and they're reportable to your local agency. So I promise that that information would then, of course, get back to this main group. They're all
Right.
really connected. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Jake asks if bait boxes are illegal per rules and regs.
Bait boxes. I have never seen swarm equipment addressed in, if that's the type of bait box you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I have personally never read that in any regulations that I've come across.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you tell the difference between aggressive, like overly defensive, and Africanized bees? Kathy asks.
Kathy, that's a debate for the ages. So a
Mm.
long time ago, when Africanized bees first came to California, they did two things. They did genetic testing on all of them, which was really cumbersome and very expensive. Then they switched to this test called a wing test to determine, they said Africanized bees had a wingspan of a millimeter difference between European honeybees. Well, that they're through crossbreeding and sole lack of staffing, that test has also been thrown out the window. So we've moved from this category of Africanization to more of a characteristic of defensive behavior. And that's really determined by everyone individually. It's your own feeling if they seem or are acting uncharacteristically. Um, Legally, that's determined by an apiary inspector or some official, like a state entomologist or an ALINA, an apiculturalist, that has the authority to do that. So I hope that answers that a little bit.
Alfonso was wondering too if you could share the map link,
Yeah,
sand egg that you brought up.
yeah.
Maybe
I'll
throw it in the chat. And Elizabeth is grateful, Leah, and you did an awesome job, a lot of background work. And she said that her regional guild is county-based and has listed and linked all of the municipal codes related to beekeeping for each of the cities in their county. And many of the cities default to the county regulations because they don't have a biologist on staff or resources to supervise animal husbandry.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great thank you. That's a great
mhm.
comment, Elizabeth. Yes, cities that have nothing then default right up the umbrella. Same with counties that don't have regulations, they default to that city level. And checking with your local bee clubs is a great resource if you're connected with one or maybe don't know where to start about regulations in areas around you. I think us and as a community, we've all kind of put together these little bits and pieces of big parts of regulation. So I'm hoping we can finally connect and make maybe one reasonable sheet that houses everything.
Yeah, and Bob was asking if this information is going to be required to know on for any of the camp exams, and as long as we know as campers where to find this information, that's about all we need to know really at this point. And Marin would like to know if you've ever seen a discrepancy in federal, state, and county orgs.
Yeah, yes and no. I think discrepancies that do arise come from beekeepers or whoever following a certain regulation instead of a other regulation, right? Following a county regulation, even though they're in a specific city, or vice versa, happens a lot. But discrepancies in the actual written code are few and far between. I mean, they're really looked over, checked. It took 3 years to change the code in San Diego, so it was up and down, made sure to be perfect, that it matched right then its next level, the state regulations and then the federal regulations. And that's a huge overarching issue that it would take lots and lots and lots and lots of lobbying probably to change. So if you ever do find a discrepancy, a typo or something, I'd love to know just personally. And, you could always present that at, say, your local level.
Yeah, local
Your
county level.
Yeah, your county level, your board of supervisors.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Pamela's got a really interesting question. Are we now referring to Africanized honeybees as locally defensive or overly defensive is more politically correct? What's the deal on that?
From regulators in Southern California, yes, it is. Because of that testing that's no longer happening, it's impossible to determine if a honeybee is Africanized or not Africanized just by looking at it. So we politically say that bee is demonstrating locally defensive characteristics. We believe in our minds, right, that bee has some Africanized genetics because of that's the science behind it, that we call them Africanized because of their genes, and that's not changing. They still have Africanized genes in them. But I would say, yes, the PC term is to say locally defensive. So that's meaning in your area, these bees exhibited some defensive characteristics. And, it's up to you as a beekeeper to manage for that, and then what your next steps are to be, either to requeen as a first step or abate the colony as a last step.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Corrine has an interesting insight too. She says, okay, the regulations that we read about an empty hive not being allowed, does that equate to a bait box, right?
The way I interpret the regulations about Africanized bees, so the reason you wouldn't leave your equipment out is that bees could then move into it. That I would assume would include a bait box if it's left out and uncovered, not with the purpose of a swarm of bees nearby, right? So if there's a swarm of bees on a tree 10 feet away and I as a regulator came across that, I would then immediately understand the reason for that box, not just to be left out with the chance that Africanized or defensive bees then could enter that box.
Mm-hmm. And John Johnson and Rick have a couple of questions. John's unmuted now. He'll ask directly. Go ahead,
Hi, Leah.
John.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I'm actually watching you on my laptop, and Googling stuff on my desktop and printing things out. So that was very cool. Thank you. I got a couple things I want to ask about. I'm really interested in American foul brood. Did you say you were an apiarist? Did you do apiary inspections?
I did apiary inspections a number of years ago. It's been 5 years since I've moved from regulation into teaching, but I'm no longer an inspector. So,
well, when in your time when you were doing it, it looks like AFB looks like the only thing that's listed in the California regulations as being, illegal to come in. Can you tell me just about maybe your experience with that and how to certify people that are trying to bring in hives from out of state and things like that?
Sure. So, yeah, a lot of apiary inspecting jobs involve that state to state transfer, and AFB, because it is spore released and not clearable without some sort of intervention. That's a huge, the state labels and gives a rating to every pest and disease that comes in. So we say AFB is an A-rated pathogen. So that's like top of the list, a big bad guy, opposed to say an invasive ant species or a hitchhiker that's on your bees. That's kind of the next level priority. So the regulations really cater towards things that they want to keep out the most, that they can't control the most. And AFB seems to be one of those big things. It's changed over the years too. AFB didn't used to be as prominent in California as it is now. It was a lot of, right, chalk brood was like the big thing in the 80s, 90s, and now we've kind of shifted. So I think you'll see a shift in regulation for those types of things as they evolve, as beekeeping evolves too. We didn't have much of that. I'm in San Diego, and up until very recently, we haven't had any positive AFB, but we have now. So the apiary inspectors were notified by the beekeeper. He spotted it first. And I'd say that us as beekeepers are the first line of defense to tell regulators when we see an abnormality like that. And that can affect regulation long term too. So if we don't see it for very long, it may change the regulation if it's not a concern anymore. Sorry, John, for just babbling on about it.
No, that's fine. I just get a little perspective. That was good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great question, John. How about you, Rick? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, hello to you both.
Hi.
And thanks for being here, Leah. So I'm sorry if this doesn't relate to most of the participants, but outside of my backyard beekeeping, I'm looking at starting an apiary at my college campus where I work. And I've gotten the approvals that I need on the local campus. But I do know that the city of Irvine, where my campus is located, that there are limitations in the city. I've been told, however, because we're an educational institution, and maybe this could relate to more people, I don't know, but because we're institutional, or an educational institution, excuse me, that the rules kind of don't apply to us. And I've had several different sources tell me this, but I've just to kind of cover my own butt and make sure that everybody else is taken care of on the campus, I would love to be able to track down that language somewhere. Do you know of anything like that?
Yes, there is language in your code. I am trying to pull it up while also looking at you and looking at this. So I'd be happy to send it to you later. But
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So there's a number of counties, cities. Irvine's one of them. That in the code it has a very specific language about university campuses, school campuses, keeping bees for the purposes of learning, and also keeping bees for the purposes of medical treatment. So us as researchers, you as an educator on your campus, and doctors who do sting therapy are all exempt. And it's labeled certain counties and cities have it in their code that, like, it'll say no beekeeping permitted except for these small things. And the big caveat to that is it says cannot fly at large. So it's meant to be kept like in an observation yard or something. So it gets a little complicated, but let's connect offline and I'll send it to you. So if any of you else are educators too, so be aware that there is that. Absolutely, they were right. Whoever told you that there is a small caveat of language that says it's illegal except if you're under these certain circumstances.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for confirming that. I'll look forward. We'll touch base offline. And we plan on building an enclosure, so I'm hoping that would, having the bees go up would qualify for that.
Yes.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Great question, Rick. Jim's got a really great question too. What's the recourse for someone unregistered dumping 100 colonies within a 3-mile range of your colonies? Right? He's seen it over in Grass Valley, and Beware doesn't show the registered hive density within 3 miles. So what's a beekeeper to do?
Sorry, Jim, that sounds terrible. If that happened to you, I would of course contact your local apiary inspector. If you don't know who that is, contact your local ag commissioner's office. They will be able to connect you with their whoever. And so the recourse of unregistered hives, let's start there. Dumping is a whole nother problem, but unregistered hives carry a fine of $1,000 or more. So depending on San Diego has its own fine system. For unregistered bees, you get a warning. You have 30 days to register. If you don't, you get a citation. If you don't answer the citation, then you get a fine, and then the fine goes up every day from then on. So it just depends on your local area, but Beware follows. Registrations are the #1 most protected piece of information that's ever existed in government. I will tell you that with full certainty, that your information that goes on Beware, there is part of the legislation that says that is not public ever. There's a term for requesting public documents from county or government groups. Our beekeeping registrations don't even fall under that. So they're super secret, and Beware is not going to be your resource to show you if there's bees close by or not close by. So the recourse is to call your county commissioner's office, and they'll be able, hopefully, to help you and find whoever put those hives there.
Okay. Good. Then Bob, I feel for him. His quest to change city ordinances resulted in it being stricken from the municipal code, and now the city uses general nuisance law.
Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you, Bob. Bringing forth our beekeeping.
Sorry for me.
I do feel sorry for you.
It was a good thing that there's no ordinance restricting beekeeping in my city now.
Okay.
Well, maybe that's even better. So they lifted the restrictions.
Yeah, there was an ordinance that it was written in 1941 that said you could have one hive, and then the next one within 200 feet. But none of I'm in suburbia. Our lots are less than 200 feet in any direction. So basically, it was a restriction on having more than one hive. So with someone, you may know her, Nikki Irvin, she leads the group in our guild, our bee guild, to try and make all of the ordinances or municipal codes within San Mateo County the same, and to try and keep them from being restricted. And we were going for not using numbers of hives, but using flyway control and provision of water as the requirements. And our city attorney, after we talked to her and the city council and wrote them all and met with them individually, came back and said, well, I don't think we should be in the business of regulating bees anyway. So we're just going to remove the restrictions, and there will be no restrictive ordinance anymore. And that was done in 2018.
Wow. Wow. And what city is that?
Burlingame.
Burlingame. Well, thank you. Thanks for that insight, Bob. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So, I mean, I see all these, and delving into this, I've seen all these, rules, regulations, hive numbers, distances. And I understand that the cities are trying to protect themselves by having all these ordinances in place. Maybe they're also trying to, regulate diseases and pests and that sort of thing. But it seems like maybe we should be striving to have regulation of bees liberalized as beekeepers. That's just my soapbox.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Do you see Pamela's comment, Leah, about submitting $10? And this year, she never received her license. I didn't get anything from the Beware website yet. I think they're still trying to make that connection. Still trying to develop that software.
Yeah, Pamela, I would make a copy of your check or whatever you sent in, and contact your local apiary inspector and say, where is it? Right? I don't think, I didn't get anything from Beware, like a certification or a copy or nothing. So I don't know if they're coming or not, or they're changing how Beware is giving some sort of receipt. But it would be helpful to just double check. Never hurts in regulation. Double check with your local commissioner's office.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sandy's got a great question. Is there any mapping for AFB, right? I don't think so.
Not that I know of. The state regulators are pretty protective over our information. So putting out a map of who's claimed AFB is never been public as far as I know.
Yeah.
It would be helpful though. Although I can say, so in San Diego, late last couple years ago, we had an AFB hive, and all the neighbors within a certain mile radius were notified if they kept bees that there was AFB nearby. So I hope other inspectors are as proactive, letting the community know if they find it.
And Corrine says, to be clear, we're supposed to receive an actual physical piece of paper that says that, that we're licensed. She never received it.
No,
and that's different, I'm sure, for every single county, right? Yeah,
it is, sadly.
Yeah. And Jim indicated that he thought El Dorado County waived the fee for this year. Beware gives you a serial number, nevertheless. Yeah, which is true. Thought about that. Yeah. So here we are at 8:04, and just checking in to see if there are any other questions before we thank Leah very much for her valuable time and amazing skill in navigating all of the websites, really, and knowing, where to get the answers from. That itself is gold right there. Doesn't appear to, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks for showing up, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you
Leah.
for coming. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your interest.
Thank you, Leah.
Oh, you're so welcome, Pamela.